Yeah, sure thing.
Hey, you sold that car yet?
Yeah, sold it to Carvana.
Oh, I thought you were selling to that guy.
The guy who wanted to pay me in foreign currency, no interest, over 36 months? Yeah, no. Carvana gave me an offer in minutes, picked it up, and paid me on the spot. It was so convenient.
Just like that.
Yeah?
No hassle.
None.
That is super convenient.
Sell your car to Carvana and swap hassle for convenience. Pickup fees may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Just a tinge of excitement in my voice there, Kieran, because the script stayed up. It didn't disappear this time. When I minimise it and bring it up, it didn't. So I'm literally a quiver. I'm almost holding my hands to the screen in an attempt to keep it there. I realise it doesn't work like that. You sound a little bit, my old mate, like you're full of cold, but you're up there in your bachelor pad in Liverpool by the look of it.
I am. I'm held together by a combination of paracetamol and strepsils, which is a proper bloke's diet.
Yeah, I look forward to my 2 paracetamol in the morning. No matter how I'm feeling, I even quite like getting up early to feed the cats. I think I'll have the paracetamol early. Lovely. I'm aware there's a couple of doctors who listen to this who will be saying, don't keep taking paracetamol, it's not good for you. You don't need them. It's Newsday, Kieran. We've got a lot of big stories. This first one, I have to say, I thought this story had gone away. These are good times for Everton at the moment, but... Again, it looks like they're being dragged into an historic legal case.
Yes. Everton, as we know, were subject to a PSR commission from the Premier League, and that covered effectively 2 sets of 3 years, which overlapped, as people may recall. And the first points deduction took place a couple of years after the first offence took place. And at the time, there was talk about 3 clubs who had been relegated potentially launching some form of compensation claim against Everton. And then it sort of died a death. But it now appears that Burnley, who were relegated in season 21-22, and they finished 4 points behind Everton that season, it looks as if their legal counsel has decided that they feel that they've got a case against Everton, and therefore they can't reverse the table, they can't return to the Premier League. So it looks as if they're going to seek some form of financial redress. They will claim, presumably, that had Everton not been in a position where they breached PSR rules, that they wouldn't have been able to sign all of the players, or they wouldn't be able to keep all of the players that they had for that season. They would have therefore generated fewer points, and potentially Burnley could have therefore avoided relegation. So that's position. I've spoken to some of our secret lawyers, and they say it's not something that you can prove, because it could be that Everton had signed some duffers on big salaries that season. So that would be part of their defence, and also it's very difficult to quantify the impact of an individual player in terms of the points that you earn and so on. But are there precedents? Well, yes, there are. And if we go back to 2005, when Sheffield United were relegated, they put in a similar claim following the Carlos Tevez and was it Mascherano as well, who were signed by West Ham, and it was subsequently, I think, proven that there'd been third-party ownership of those two players, which was a breach of the rules. But Sheffield United claimed that they had suffered indirectly as a result of this because they were relegated and West Ham wasn't. And nobody knows the exact amount that was paid across at the time, but it was rumoured to be somewhere in the region of £20 million. Now, £20 million in 2005, if you look at the size of the TV deals and how they've grown since then, it's clearly much more significant than that. The secret lawyers we had a chat with said, you can't say we've got to therefore give the difference between Premier League TV revenues and what you're getting in the Championship, because there still was not a 100% chance that Burnley would have survived and so on. But there is a case, and there is also, of course, a defence. And clearly Everton will be defending this using their knowledge and their counsel's view. I suspect we will have perhaps an out-of-court settlement. We won't get to hear the results. If we take a look again, are there any other precedents? We know that Middlesbrough, they petitioned against Derby County. Yeah. When Middlesbrough missed out on a playoff place, they said that Derby had breached the PSR rules. That was when Derby were in administration, so we don't know the exact details, but it was rumoured that Mel Morris settled this personally because that meant that Derby weren't on the hook for it, and also it allowed the administrators to settle. I think Wycombe Wanderers tried something against Derby. We never managed to find out how that one was particularly resolved. So we have had these cases take place in the past. And clearly Everton are in a much better place than they were a few months ago. But I think this is indicative of the increasing litigious nature of football. And, our good friend Nick DeMarco has said that, are things going to reach a point at some place in football where refereeing decisions and VAR decisions are going to form the basis of compensation? Well, we know that we've got many American owners, and America's a very litigious society. I guess we could potentially be moving in that direction.
The way things are going at the moment, Kieran, whoever wins this case depends on which of them gets Nick DeMarco first, basically, because that would seem to be the indicator that either Burnley or Everton will win it. Also, I mean, there's every chance that Burnley are going to get promoted back to the Premier League, Kieran. And if it just so happens that Everton's first game at the new stadium is against Burnley, that's going to be tasty.
I think that'll be uber feisty.
But one question springs to mind, Kieran. And we are. This is going out on Thursday morning, so this afternoon you and I will be at the. Hang on, what we're allowed to call it Spurs? Yeah, we can call it Spurs. We can't call it Tottenham. So we'll be at the Spurs Stadium,
yes,
or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, or White Hart Lane for where we're giving a seminar at an international sports convention, which still makes me laugh. I got sent the program today, and it's just like seminar to 2:45 to 3:30. Kieran Maguire and Kevin Day. I'll be sitting behind you in that one, Kieran. But if any of our secret lawyers are there, Kieran, it'd be quite nice if you could introduce me to one very quietly, obviously in a little corridor, because I've got a question for them. So what I don't quite understand about this compensation case is, could you not argue that Burnley should be suing or asking the Premier League for compensation as much as they're asking Everton, because it's the Premier League that set the sanction and essentially didn't deduct them any points or cause them to be relegated. Everton did what you'd expect Burnley would have done in similar circumstances. So it seems odd to me that they're not trying to get money from the. I would imagine they've got two chances of getting compensation from Everton: 0 and none. But I just wonder why it's not the Premier League that they're looking to get cash out of.
Well, I think if you take a look at the Premier League handbook at the time, there wasn't the opportunity for in-season breaches because the accounts don't come out for 9 months after the end of the season. You're always looking in your rear-view mirror. So I think that would make it more difficult, but more difficult, again, not the same as impossible. But presumably Burnley have taken legal advice and feel that perhaps Everton are an easier target and therefore going down that route instead.
This next story, Kieran, is a bittersweet one, especially for those commentators and pundits responsible for the overly sentimental, saccharine, lachrymose coverage of the Carabao Cup on Saturday, where we were led to believe that Newcastle fans were still streaming out of the factories at 12 o'clock on a Saturday in their clogs to go to St James's Park to watch Newcastle play. But it seems like St James's Park's day could be over, Kieran.
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting story. It's come from Craig Hope at the Mail, and we know that a decision is going to have to be made with regards to the capacity at St James's Park being increased or moving to a new stadium. Effectively, the same decision which was having to be made at Manchester United.
Yeah.
And I think Craig's article appeared to indicate that decision has been made, and therefore they were moving to a new, I think it's a city centre location at a place called Leazes Park. But I've been looking at the Newcastle local press, and they still seem to think that decision is in discussion point and it hasn't been finalised. And certainly there appear to be developments on a daily basis. So it now looks like there'll be some environmental protests if they move to Leazes Park. The new stadium, I think we're probably talking 65, 68,000 capacity. And the argument for moving to a new stadium is similar to what we've seen at Spurs, in that you've got a multi-use, multi-function, multi-sport stadium which can be used for more than 25 to 30 days a year. If you've got the advantage of it being city centre, then you've got less complications potentially than you have for an out-of-town stadium where you've got transportation links and hospitality links and all of the other complications. So we're not exactly sure where we are as far as that one is concerned, but there's no doubt that given the level of support, and I've got many mates who are Liverpool fans, who are Newcastle fans. I've got many mates who are Liverpool fans as well, who are still beaming, and rightly so. When you've waited that length of time.
Of course.
But I don't think they particularly enjoy the somewhat southern bias view of people in the northeast as well. So they can certainly fill that stadium, given the massive enthusiasm there is for football in the northeast, as we're aware. But what they've got to be able to do, and this is the downside, is not they've got to fill it, but they've got to make sure it generates revenue. Yeah, because now we're moving into the region where you've got Manchester United, Spurs, Arsenal, Liverpool as well in a good season, all bringing in more than £100 million a year from ticket sales. That's got to be the ambition of Newcastle's owners if they want to compete on the pitch. And so Newcastle fans want them to compete on the pitch. Then it's a case of getting that balance right between the passionate local fans and the corporate hospitality elements of a new stadium, because without those, it doesn't become cost efficient.
I imagine even you were pleased to see Dan Burn win a trophy there, as you will be when Cucurella and Caicedo win a trophy with their new club, I'm guessing.
For Dan Burn, I think every single Brighton fan was absolutely delighted, because he was a great player for us. When he arrives, this 6'7" guy who Graham Potter converted into a left back, we're going, what on earth's going on? Everybody loved Dan when he was down at our place, and when a player is returning home, you do sort of absolutely understand the logic behind the move. And when he scored that goal, I was absolutely chuffed, and I was trying to check the small print of his sale deal to see whether Brighton got a bonus from that, of course, because it's a finance show.
Of course, St James's Park is a great stadium to visit, kid. There's no doubt about it. unless you're scared of heights, in which it's not the best. Although, if you like seagulls, it's a brilliant away place to go to. You get a really good close-up view of it. You get closer to seagulls. Obviously, I don't like seagulls for various reasons, Kieran. But
Of course.
I'm guessing though, because I mean, what is it? It takes you 10 minutes to walk up the hill from the station. So I mean, it's prime real estate, really, in a beautiful city. So I'm imagining that any new stadium would be financed heavily by the sale of the current one, wouldn't it?
Well, then we come to some complications because I believe there are covenants relating to the use of St James's Park, which go back a long time. And therefore, whether it can be used for industrial, retail, commercial, residential purposes is something we'll have to wait to find out. Because, I mean, certainly if you look at what happened at Arsenal when they moved from Highbury to the Emirates, that's all been converted into residentials. Yeah. The same happened at West Ham, although what West Ham Stadium was sold for and what it was then immediately resold for has always been an interesting debate. Yeah. But we've dealt with that in the past. So I think that could be the only complication, that the potential released funds from the demolition of St James's Park and the move to a new stadium, could that be used for further purposes to maximise some additional money coming in? We're not so certain about that.
PSG, Kieran, it's amazing. Without the Galacticos, they are a much more likeable team.
Yes.
And they're much. I find myself wanting to win, whereas in previous seasons, you really want them to lose as quickly as possible to serve them right. But they're a great team to watch. I don't think many neutrals would be upset if they did win the Champions League. But if they do, they're going to be ka-chinging it, aren't they?
Yes, and I think this is reflective of UEFA, who have put an awful lot of work into the revamped Swiss model, as it's now known, in terms of the Champions League. So it looks as if they could earn around about 145 million euro. And that's from TV money alone. So you've got your gate receipts, you've got your sponsor bonuses on top of that. So realistically, you're probably not shy of 200 million euro in total. I think UEFA have done some good things this year. So they've reduced the coefficient you were given simply because you were Real Madrid, for want of a better phrase. It used to be that the 5 and 10 year coefficients, and I think it was over 30% of the money was given to how you've performed in the Champions League over the last 5 years. That percentage has dropped. More money is going to clubs for winning football matches, for finishing higher up in the table, because now we've got this 36 position table, and therefore more is being focused on what you've done this season rather than what you've done historically. And Real Madrid have been amazing in terms of their Champions League and European Cup record. But it's always good to see trophies being shared around a bit more. So I've got friends at Liverpool who went to the two matches, and they said it was absolutely amazing football, and they wish PSG all the best going forwards, and that was very similar to what we experienced when Brighton went to Newcastle, and that's why I delighted for Dan Burns in more ways than one, because the Newcastle fans, when we won in the FA Cup, were incredibly gracious, and I think that's been the view of Liverpool fans I've spoken to. If we're going to get knocked out, we don't mind being knocked out by such a good football team, but as you say, one that doesn't have that Galactico sort of purchased mentality that it was being associated with a couple of years ago.
Well, also, and we're not a football pod, so we'll mention this very quickly, it just shows you what happens when you've got 11 players trying to win the game rather than 9, basically. Yes.
When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof, like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business, making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Two stories from women's football, Kieran, and the first one's slightly odd because Man City's women's team are spending more, but also losing more at the same time, by the look of it.
Yes, it's this paradox of the world of finance, and I know I've said it before, and I've said it quite glibly. There's too much focus on the money coming in, but we do have this saying: revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. And what we've seen at Manchester City is that they had a successful 23-24. We've got the new WSL TV deal, which we talk about in a minute. So revenue was up 30%. So you think that would be absolutely fantastic. But the wage bill was up 40%. And therefore, as a consequence of that, they lost £3 million. I think all of the clubs in the WSL tend to be losing money. And even those which are breaking even, when you have a more detailed look, what you tend to find is that they're getting sort of a disproportionate amount of money coming from commercial deals. And how is that being allocated from the parent club? It does seem to be a little bit arbitrary. I think all of the WSL clubs have got a challenge in increasing their matchday income. And it's how do you get that balance right? You want to get as many people in as possible. But if you price it at too low a price, then how do you increase those prices? Because you could argue that the quality of the product deserves a higher price. And trying to get that balance right is difficult. But we've seen Arsenal do spectacularly well hosting half of their matches for the women's team now at the Emirates and getting crowds of now 45, 40, 48, 50,000, which shows that there is an audience. But the clubs are still all losing money.
I know a lot of people in the women's game, Kieran, find it tedious when comparisons are constantly made to the men's game. But just for newer listeners, perhaps, could you compare the Manchester City women's annual salary bill to the Manchester City men's annual salary bill?
The Manchester City salary bill is probably 2% of the men's.
2%?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's
so. Well. But then, if you look at the revenues, the revenues are less than 2%. So, I think comparing a WSL club to a Premier League club, you're always going to get these figures that don't seem to stack up. I think benchmarking against a League Two team, you find that actually Manchester City's revenues are pretty good by League Two standard. They're probably higher than those of at least a third of League One clubs as well. So the people that turn their nose up at women's football, you say, well, if that's your attitude, then that's your attitude to Wickham, that's your attitude to Morecambe, that's your attitude to Walsall, and so on.
We've spoken at quite some length, Kieran, recently. Very good, quiet sneezing work there, Kieran, for the benefit of the audience. Mr. Maguire is sneezing quietly in the background. We've spoken about the WSL and their conversation about suspending relegation for 4 seasons. And as you mentioned with the broadcast, there's been an unintended consequence, perhaps, because the broadcasters are not entirely happy with this.
Yeah, I think we've got to be honest. The viewing figures for the women's game haven't been matching the expectations of the broadcasters, who are locked into. I think they've now got a 3 or 4 year deal with the new co as far as women's football is concerned. So under those circumstances, they will be looking at the small print of the contract. And you and I, we both supported EFL teams when ITV Digital had that deal, which caused ITV Digital to go bust, and they were looking for ways out of that contract from very early doors. My understanding is that the contract that the broadcasters have with the WSL is for a 12-team WSL. And if that 12 teams becomes 13, 14, 15 or 16, does that therefore mean that the original contract is no longer valid? And therefore, could that be used as an excuse by the broadcasters to renegotiate? There's also a case for saying that we know at this part of the season, the relegation fight is as interesting, as intriguing as who's going to win the Premier League, because to a certain extent, I think everybody accepts that Liverpool have got a 99.9% chance of winning it this season. So what is interesting, people? And I've often found myself more drawn to relegation matches than who's at the top end of the table. If no clubs are going to be relegated from the WSL, does it therefore mean that potentially the broadcasters are going to be given a sort of a poison chalice in that they're broadcasting games which have no jeopardy, have no downside if you lose? And if that is the case, that could have a further detrimental impact upon viewing figures, which you could get into a vicious spiral. So it's a good contract. It's a £65 million contract. It's been well negotiated by Newco, and you've got to give the people who negotiated that on behalf of the women's game a lot of credit. But there is a danger that the TV companies who do they want to support women's football? Yes. They don't want to have to go and pay a penny more than they have to. Could they be using this as a vehicle to try to get it at a lower price? And you might say, well, why would they do that? Well, you look to see what happened with the Scottish football deal, for example, when Rangers were kicked out of the Scottish Premiership, and therefore it was a foregone conclusion as to Celtic winning the Scottish Premiership. The value of Scottish TV rights started to decrease. It's nothing personal. It's business, as Don Corleone would say. Yeah.
Well, just last week, Palace women, bottom of the WSL, played Aston Villa, second bottom of the WSL in classic 6-pointer. If that was this time next season with no relegation, it would be a pointless, meaningless game, really. And to be perfectly honest, with the way the WSL is going, if you've got, you can understand the broadcaster's view, if you've got a league as you already have where probably only 3 teams can win it, arguably only 2 teams can win it, then if there's nothing for the rest of the teams to play for, those the broadcasters are going to say, well, why should we show Palace Villa anyway? What's in it? What's in it for us? Full stop. We might as well only show the teams that have something riding on it. So, exactly. And on the broadcasting front, Kieran, finally, we've discovered why it is that DAZN beat ITV to get the contract to broadcast the Club World Cup. We thought it might have been something Ali McCoist had said inadvertently in an after-dinner speech, but no, we found out there's a financial reason why DAZN beat ITV to the deal to broadcast the Club World Cup.
That's right. So DAZN have got sort of the global rights, which they can then effectively sell on to domestic broadcasters. There's been no interest from the BBC. I don't think there's been any interest from Sky either. So ITV have said, yeah, we'll show it, and we bid £0. That's how much we think it's worth. I believe that Channel 5 might be in the running as well. But that is, I think, it's reflective of the broadcasters have done their research. And is this arrogance because we come from a different football culture to the FIFA Club World Cup? I don't think so. I think we're footballed out to a certain extent, and we've often said, well, if there's 2 blokes, if there's 2 blokes, 2 sets of blokes of 11, 2 sets of women of 11 kicking the ball around, we'll watch it. Well, we don't, because we don't tend to watch quite a lot of football that's now available, especially international football that you can access. And this competition is not engaging with fan bases. I talk to my friends who are Manchester City fans, and they've got bigger fish to fry as far as their club is concerned. I think they would rather they weren't in it, and they would rather they focus on a rebuild. Chelsea seem to be a little bit more pro the Club World Cup, but I think that's more to do with the fact that they've been promised £50 million for participating in it, more than anything else. And I just don't see any enthusiasm. So if there's no enthusiasm from fans, that means that the viewing figures are going to be low. So therefore, ITV aren't going to be able to get much money back from sponsors and advertisers. So why bid more than, you might as well go and put on repeats of Minder and the Sweeney on ITV4, because it'll be on ITV4 if it's shown.
Yeah. I'm still going to spread the story that Alan McCoist was involved. I prefer that narrative. It's bad enough, Kieran, that Brighton owner Tony Bloom is trying to ruin my life football-wise on a daily basis, but he ruined Cheltenham for me last week. I love Cheltenham. I sit down and watch every race. I only have money on one race a day, but I still watch the other races because I love the sport. And there was a particular race, really, really close finish, and I was cheering on the winner until I suddenly thought, hang on, I recognise those colours. And it was that little sod's horse. I found myself inadvertently cheering Tony Bloom's horse onto victory, which is I had to go and lie down in a darkened room for a few moments, Kieran, before going back to watch it again. But he's spreading his wings, Kieran. He's bought a stake in another club.
That's right. And I absolutely understand as a Palace fan why you don't want to say anything positive about Tony Bloom.
No.
I think this is a broader good news story in the sense that he's bought a 19% stake in Melbourne Victory, and I believe it's been acquired from our very good friends 777 Partners. So,
okay,
they are a toxic influence on football. So why has he done it? I think he spends part of his time in Australia. I think his wife isn't particularly healthy, and therefore they spend some of their time there for weather purposes as much as anything else. Tony Bloom is a smart investor. So that he's investing potentially in Hearts, potentially in Melbourne, because the model that he uses is identifying players in slightly different markets. I think it's good news for Melbourne Victory, and I have been contacted in the last 48 hours by our secret Aussie, and we're hoping to get somebody from Australian football, from the A-League, to come as a guest on the show. And I think the future of Australian football is something which we discussed in the question show, which went out on Tuesday. And I think it's something which we do have a connection with Australia, and it'd be interesting to hear their viewpoints.
Based purely on my experiences with Australian comedians, Kieran, keeping them quiet is hard enough, so keeping them secret would be true. Obviously, I do have a connect. It was an Australian doctor that saved my mum's life and my life when I was born. Now, Tony Bloom clearly is a smart investor. Absolutely, we know that. He's a very smart cookie. But we did take a fairly comprehensive look on our Last Questions pod, Kieran, at the finances of the A-League, and they're not particularly impressive. And off the back of that, you'd think that Tony Bloom wouldn't be looking to make much money on his return. I mean, if he's done it simply to get 777 out of a toxic brand, then even I will take my hat off to him. But it does seem if he's done it as an investment, it might be quite some time before he receives a decent return on that, based on what you told us on the last pod.
Yeah, I think in terms of a financial return, it's going to be. You're absolutely right. It's going to be a very long period of time. From a player development point of view, Australia is an undertapped market. If you take a look at what's happening amongst Aussie kids. And yeah, again, we are stereotyping here. We assume that every Australian child, when they're not at school, is spending all of their time swimming, surfing, playing cricket, playing Aussie rules, and so on. Well, it turns out that the most popular sport in Australia is, in fact, football at school level.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So is there a potential market for the development of Australian footballers? Because there's been relatively few of them who have come to England to ply their trade. So having an investment in an Australian team, and we've got Manchester City have got relationships with Australia as well. Yeah. It's another place to identify talent. And if that talent is good, you then bring that talent to Europe, and you can make your money from player trading.
Now, you see, I thought Tony Bleam may have been doing a good thing, getting rid of 777. I'm now much happier with the notion that he's actually doing it to exploit Australian kids. I'm much happier with that notion. I can rest happily. We've talked on virtually every pod recently, Kieran, about clubs, even down to National League level, being flirted with by Americans or celebrities, and here's another one.
Yes, this is. I think this is a club making its debut on the Price of Football.
I believe it is.
So this is Barrow, and I've always sort of had a soft spot for Barrow, because I think Barrow were one of the very first clubs that I remember being kicked out of the 92.
Barrow and Work.
Because we go back to when the club that finished bottom of the old fourth division then had to effectively seek re-election. So we didn't have the 1 up, 2 up, or even ideally the 3 up, 3 down position that we have at present. And this is for younger listeners, in terms of the relationship between the EFL and the National League. It was 92 chairmen, and they were all men in those days. Yeah. Would go into a room and they would effectively be Caesar. They would give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to that club. And I remember, Rochdale and Hartlepool sort of escaped on more than one occasion. Yeah. But I remember as a kid, Barrow being given the old boot. And then they've come back. So I've always been delighted that that's been the case. But they're now in talks, and it says here, an American-based British celebrity.
Oh.
So it's not a British investor, but it's a British celebrity about putting money into the club. So, who could that? Could that be Piers Morgan? I don't think so.
Ricky Gervais? Ricky Gervais.
Ricky Gervais?
Yeah. I'd love to see Ricky Gervais walking out in Barrow once he finds out where it is.
Yes, I don't think the children of Barrow would take to what he was saying about the children of London in Afterlife, that's for sure. I think he might get more robust replies. So I think this is just reflective, again, of the huge interest that there is in English football from all aspects, and even expats or migrants, as they probably should be called, who are now based in America.
I think for a time, Kieran, it was the bottom 2 clubs that applied for re-election, and they would the team at the top of the Northern League and the Southern League would then campaign, and there were always accusations of backhanders and deals in smoky rooms, and the club chairman would look at the various crowd figures of it, because it was always a seismic shock. I think it was Workington, I think, were replaced by Wimbledon, because Wimbledon had that fantastic cup run.
Dickie Guy,
Dickie Guy, and they were eventually knocked out by Leeds in front of 48,000 people at Selhurst Park. I was one of them. So the club chairman obviously thought that Wimbledon were a better bet than Workington. But it was simply that. It was men in smoky rooms doing deal. But it was so unusual for the bottom 2 clubs not to be re-elected.
Yes,
it's so unusual, and it was a seismic shock, because in those days there was no way back. It seemed that being dropped out of the 92 in those days was extinction. It was a shocking event, and Barrow, because they're right out there on that little tongue of land, So they were a proper community club. There's quite a long way to go, and even you go two directions, you're in the sea, but there's quite a long way to go in the other direction before you hit another club. It's been I almost feel like welcoming back an old friend, Kieran. It's been a long time since we've mentioned Ron Martin, and it's been a long time. And I hate to. I don't want to steal your thunder, Kieran, but and I don't want to say this brought a smile to my lips, but I don't want to mention the word karma either. I'm going to let you explain it.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't really a football finance story as such, but as you say, it is karma. It looks as if Ron Martin has lost a legal case with McLaren Construction, and he owed it £7.9 million, which for some reason I don't think he was paying. And the construction company has won this case. And I contacted the spirit of Windsor Davis about this, and he says, "Oh dear, never mind."
Oh dear, how sad, never mind.
Yes.
Yeah. I've got the Windsor. Windsor Davis's daughter was a very well-known casting agent, and there was this place called the Players Theatre that we used to drink in. An old-timey musical, and Windsor Davis was on the committee there. We had some cracking nights with Windsor Davis, and he was one of those. The drunker he got, the more Welsh he got, which was fantastic.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
There are some people, Kieran, both in person and on social media, who seem to think we have it in for Manchester United. We don't have it in for Manchester United. Manchester's a very important part of your life. My two favourite bands are from Manchester. My all-time footballing idol was George Best, so it's very difficult for me to hate a football club that my idol played for. We're simply reflecting the fact that this is a very volatile time at Manchester United, and a lot of their fans are very unhappy. And our first of two Man United stories is this week's instalment of why Man United fan groups are unhappy.
That's right, and I do think it's important to separate football clubs from football club owners.
Absolutely.
So, I lived in Manchester for 40 years.
Yeah.
I used to go and watch Manchester United and Manchester City week in, week out when I was a student because you could.
Yeah.
Because you could go for the Stretford end for £1.30 and go to Kipax for £1.20 the following week. So as a football fan, it was what he did. But Manchester United announced a season ticket price increase of 5%. Now, there's been some interesting revelations, I think, in The Athletic and Adam Crafton, who is a man that clearly has fantastic inside links at Manchester United. I think he was reporting that initially, I think the club wanted a far bigger increase than that, but the Manchester United Supporters Trust put together a very persuasive case that, whilst ideally they wanted a freeze, they managed to curtail the excesses, again, not of Manchester United, of Manchester United owners. So we're talking about the Glazers and Offshore Gym. So Manchester United announced a 5% increase. And I think that was sort of the main issue as far as many season ticket holders were concerned. But as always, the devil is in the detail. So what we have seen is a 15% increase in car park charges. And you might say, well hold on, if you can park elsewhere in town, and I can assure you that there are many enterprising Mancunians not too far away who will keep a couple of spaces available on their front drive on a match, and you don't have to go and pay the same prices you pay for the club. So therefore, why pay? Well, I presume that this 15% increase also applies to disabled fans, because we discussed this a few months ago, that disabled fans were being charged an awful lot of money by Manchester United, and Manchester United's management's argument was that our disabled fans don't want to be treated as charity cases. And I found that fairly galling to hear, because as a non-disabled fan, I've got the option of walking from the city centre or catching a tram or other modes of transport which aren't available to disabled fans. So I didn't think that was a particularly valid argument. So car parking charges are going up by 15%. If you've got a season ticket and you are close to the dugout, you're being turfed out, because Manchester United have just realised that they can sell these as hospitality packages, and you can be within, I wouldn't say spitting distance, because that's probably too vulgar, but you can be at a much closer distance to the manager, to the bench, and they feel that they can. So you might have been in that season ticket for 10, 20, 30 years, do one, unless you're prepared to go and pay these new prices. And then we come to senior fans, and we've seen this before. So this isn't a dig at Manchester United senior management. This is also a dig at West Ham, at Spurs and other clubs, and I don't think it's too great at Brighton either, from what I've seen, in the sense that senior fans historically have paid half price at football grounds for their season tickets. Well, that 50% discount is being reduced from 50% to 25%. So therefore, if you take a look at what's happening to season ticket prices for seniors, they're not going up by 5%, they're going up by 40%.
Yeah.
And these are the people, and I read one story in the Telegraph today. It was a guy saying, look, I've been supporting Manchester United all my life. I've got my state pension, which is 11.5 grand a year. And now, according to the Glazers and offshore gym, I need to stump up. And it's something which keeps me going. I always go back to what Ali said to you about the importance of football, especially to men as they grow older. It's that sense of togetherness. It gives you a sense of focus, and you're seeing Dave and Sam and Colin and so on, that you've been always sat around that table in that pub for the last 34 years. Well, these people are being driven away from football, and these people are being driven away from football to make up for the mistakes of billionaires and to make up for the largesse of billionaires. And I think that's pretty distasteful of the people in charge of these clubs. You don't have to go down that route too. So this isn't a criticism of the Manchester United owners. It's criticism of all of those club owners that are seeing elderly fans as people who are not generating enough money. Because let's face it, you're not going to buy 3 strips. You're not going to go and spend time in catering and buying a programme, but you've still got that love of Manchester United, which has helped to build that club and to build the reputation and the success and the allure of Manchester United, which so many people are attracted to these days. So, yes, it's a 5% increase for some, but a 40% increase for pensioners, disgraceful.
I understand, Kieran. Absolutely. Football clubs are not charities. I get that.
Yeah.
I do understand that, but I think what football clubs don't realise is, I'm thinking of 2 elderly Palace fans in particular that I know. One's a little too old to go now, but they're both in their 90s. And from around Thursday afternoon, they would start looking forward to Saturday. And they would be picked up at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and take them for breakfast to the cafe and then take them to the pub and made a general fuss of, rightly so. And it was their week. They loved it. It was, and they're both, the result to them wasn't important. They've seen enough in their life they're not losing any sleep when Palace win, lose or draw. But take that away from them, and they are losing sleep. Take that chance to go to the game. Take that chance for them to. And I know this sounds incredibly sentimental, but take that chance away for them to talk to young people about the players they've seen back in the day. Even if you've heard the story before, of course you patiently sit there and listen to it, and that's what club owners don't understand. Before we've got a second Man United story, Kieran, but this idea of selling the row behind the dugout seems to be becoming increasingly popular. I noticed a report that Chelsea are selling the row immediately behind the dugout. And bear in mind, these are restricted view seats because you're looking at the dugout. They're selling them for $12,500 a pop.
Yeah,
$12,500 a game. The restricted view, so almost like the American model, where you pay an absolute fortune to sit in a chair ringside at a basketball game.
Because that's an experience. That's what they're selling. They're not selling the seat; they're selling the experience. And I went to a British basketball game a few months ago to watch the London Basketball Club.
Yeah.
And I ended up being sat right behind Josh Wander of 777 because I was in the second row. And you don't get the greatest of view because you're at court level. So you're overpaying for the experience in the hope that you might get hit by a ball or a player might slide a couple of yards in front of you. But it does seem very bizarre. But I guess the argument goes is that if people are prepared to pay $12,500, then we will create an environment where we can relieve them of that $12,500 because they can say that they've done it and they've entertained a client or they've taken one of their kids who's always been a lifelong Chelsea fan for a special occasion. It's very weird.
Thing is, though, Kieran, if you're at a basketball game in LA, you might be paying $10,000, but you could be sitting next to Jack Nicholson. You go to a basketball game in London, you're sitting next to Joe Schwash. It's not quite the same thing, really. We're not the only people to say this, Kieran, but since the Man United Stadium plans were announced, a lot of people have said, well, you're going to have to raise the car park charges quite a lot and get rid of a lot more free lunches to raise the £100 million necessary for that stadium. But it seems counterintuitively, Kieran, that the markets were not particularly happy with this announcement.
That's right. Within, I think, 2 or 3 days of the announcement, Manchester United's share price fell to its lowest point for 12 months. If we take a look, if this project is as good as the Glazers and Ratcliffe claim it to be, and to be fair, let's face it, we've not had a word out of the Glazers. So this is very much Jim Ratcliffe's idea. If this project is as visionary and as good, you would think that investors would be piling in. Well, they're not. And I went on to my finance website today, and if you take a look at Manchester United's share price, when Manchester United was first listed in 2012 on the New York Stock Exchange, since then, the Dow Jones index has more than tripled in value. And Manchester United's share price is lower than it was in 2012.
Wow. So
the market, and look, Manchester United is a magnificent institution. It's a magnificent football club. It's part of the fabric of the city. I'm very fortunate, I would say. I teach all over the world. And as soon as people hear that I've taught in Manchester and so, tell me more about Manchester United. Everybody wants to know about Manchester United. But that's not borne out by the markets. And the markets are seeing something which I think the media are not seeing. And they are seeing the poor decisions which are being made by executives again and again and again and again. And that's being reflected in the share price. If this was a really good deal, if this was a really good project, you would expect people to want to surf that wave, to buy in low so they could sell high. Well, they're selling. The prices go down because people are selling.
I've always wanted to use this expression, Kieran, because I think it sounds really cool when newsreaders say it. But what's spooked the market? Because is it that they don't like the plan itself? Is it that they don't like the reaction to people about? Because on the face of it, you'd think, well, I mean, it looks brilliant. I mean, and when you see the artist's visualization of the inside of the stadium, it looks fantastic. They're going to sell every ticket for it every week. So it's that's why I say it seems counterintuitive that people are not responding to it in a more positive way. Well,
they are going to sell every ticket but it's not every week. It's 25 times a year.
Well, yeah.
So it's not, and this is where I think Spurs have been really clever, and I think Manchester United will try to replicate this to make it more multifunction, multi-use, and so on. And that's why it's got sort of this tent approach, because they'll be hoping to have more things taking place there. But they've still got the overheads 365 days a year and generating money. Even if they get it to 40 days a year, it's still closed far more days than it's open. There is the issue of funding. And because Manchester United has existing debt, which has been placed on the club by the Glazer family, let's be honest, again, it comes down, it's not Manchester United, it's the owners that we have to be focusing our attention on. If Manchester United, I think they can probably borrow no more than 60% of the cost of the new stadium. So either Jim Ratcliffe or some third-party investors need to find £800 million. Yeah, they can do that. That's not actually a lot of money in business terms. But they're having to borrow $1 billion or 1.2 billion. But if you've got that existing debt, it's a bit like taking out a second mortgage.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody's ever taken out a second mortgage, they will tell you the rate of interest they're paying on the second mortgage is much higher than the interest rate on their first mortgage, because from a lender's point of view, you're taking on more risk. And how do you reflect risk? You reflect risk in the price of interest. So people are starting to do the sums, and they're going, well, we're not actually sure that this is going to be hugely beneficial. And is it therefore a rich man's vanity project as much as anything else, as an improvement in the football team? And you talk to Manchester United fans, and some of my United mates, they contacted me after it was announced, and their first reaction was, does this mean we're going to go down the same route as Arsenal did when they moved from Highbury to the Emirates, in the sense that Arsene Wenger's playing budget was constrained because the focus was on meeting the construction costs, meeting the interest costs, and so
on. One more question on this, Kieran. If the share price was to continue to fall off the back of this announcement, how far would it have to fall before they might rethink the new stadium? Or is this something that Jim Ratcliffe is going to, as you say, vanity project, is going to happen regardless of what the markets think about it?
I don't think that there'll be any consideration as to market reaction. To be fair, it's bottomed out. It's had a bit of a bump since it hit that 52-week low a few days ago. So I genuinely don't think that the two things are interlinked. And it's now a case of, can it be done for £2 billion? Because there's still some complications. There's been a lack of detail from the club. We are living in a very complicated world at present. So that means construction projects. Yeah. Every construction project that I've ever seen has tended to come in over budget and has generated less money than the owners initially thought. So I think there's natural caution. But I still think that if it's going to go ahead, it will go ahead regardless of market sentiment.
Well, I'm told there's a shortage of construction materials worldwide, Kieran, but I was told that by a scaffolder in the Parsons Arms, so I'm taking that with a slight pinch of salt. It's no secret, Kieran, our last story, as I say, it's no secret our affection for Accrington Stanley and our admiration for Andy Holt, who's very passionate and occasionally volatile owner of Accrington Stanley. And I'm only too happy normally to mention Accrington Stanley, but occasionally there's an Accrington Stanley story you think, I'm going to put my crash helmet on, basically, and then get as far away from Andy Holt as possible. And I'm guessing this is an Andy Holt crash helmet story, Kieran, this one, isn't it?
Yes. We did a live show.
We did.
At the new clubhouse at Accrington Stanley. But was it three or 4 years ago?
Yeah,
we had a great time. Andy was a fascinating guest, entertaining, combative, and so on. And 4 days later, Shawaddy Waddy were playing. Yeah. We were the warm-up act for Shawaddy Waddy, which I'm still putting that on my gravestone, as far as I'm concerned. I was a big Shawaddy Waddy fan back in the 70s, before I went punk. I think is it Hydeburn Council? They have now said that Accrington cannot host any events after 7:30 p.m. except on match days, i.e., effectively the club bar.
Yeah.
And for football clubs that are community based and that are trying to generate money, having the ability to have events and so on. There's been complaints from local residents. There's been too much noise and so on. So I contacted the secret Accrington Stanley owner earlier today. If I remove the swear words, there's not much left. But effectively said towns need to support their football clubs because you take away the football club and you take away the identity of the town. He says it's more than just Accrington Stanley. It's evidence of a NIMBYism. It's an evidence of a sneering attitude held by many councils towards football in general. And let's face it, we've experienced that all of our lives as football fans. And the alternative is that if you take away the ability of the football club to be part of a community, the football club will die.
Yeah.
So I think it is a sad story. I know I've had some pushback on this from supporters of the decision. He says, you don't have to live, close to. Well, it's not going to be that raucous, and I think it is being overplayed. The football club has been part of Accrington for 50 or 60 years. If you're going to buy a residence close to there, you probably do a bit of due diligence before moving in.
The vast majority of those residents, the football club was there before them. And of course, I understand there's an element of nuisance. There's also an element of compromise. It's like you could say, well, how about we finish at 10 o'clock? No later than 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like, most people are not going to be annoyed about that because the thing is as well, not only do towns and cities need football clubs, they need entertainment venues.
Exactly.
We've seen, you and I are both music fans, and we've seen over our decades of seeing live bands how few places there are left to see live bands, especially new bands. The time was, I grew up in South London, Tooting and Streatham. There was a strict hierarchy. Bands started off in the castle or the above the White Line, and they moved up to bigger pubs. They moved up to the Half Moon, and then you saw them, you followed them. That's disappeared. So you can't have a town or a city without a live venue, and sometimes that comes at a bit of inconvenience. In the same way that clubs are disappearing in Berwick Street and Soho because people are buying apartments off the back of the ambience of Soho, moving into Soho, and then going, well, this ambience is a bit noisy, isn't it? We need to get these clubs the same as those people, those idiots from cities who move to the countryside and go, well, we need to stop these cows moving. This is disgraceful. There needs to be the whole point about living in a city or a town. There needs to be a bit of give and take. There needs to be somewhere for people to go and see Shawaddy Waddy, for people to go and see amateur boxing, for people to go and see a local comedian. And that in a town like Accrington, that money is staying in Accrington, basically. We know the good stuff that Andy Holt does with local communities, local charities, local schools. The free tickets and scarves and kits he's given to local schools is not funded by the football; it's funded by the entertainment in the club. So there has to be a level of give and take. It really has to, and I can understand his frustration here. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page, and everyone who's now joined the brand new Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join that club too, you can go to our website, which is thepriceoffootball.com. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our excellent books, or it's back, the Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on our website, priceoffootball.com. One of the benefits you get from the Price of Football Club, Kieran, is the monthly chat with us live online, and I believe Monday week, I think. I'm not sure that's confirmed.
Yeah.
There's another one coming up. The two we've done so far have been immensely enjoyable, and we've had some fantastic conversations and probably some more honest discussion than we would get than just you and I answering questions on the pod. We're getting a really interesting insight from a whole range of different people on there. So the more the merrier. We'd love you to come and join us as well. We'll be back on Tuesday with our next questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, as always, for everybody that gets in contact with us through a myriad of communication vehicles. Those that are in the Price of Football Club, we are looking forward to having a chat with you. But equally, we cannot stress this enough. Times are tough, so we will still. We've got a show coming out tomorrow, which the club members have been able to watch a couple of days early, with Simon Locke about Roman Abramovich. That's well worth listening to. Yeah. But there's other ways that you can support us, and we do appreciate it. And it only doesn't take you very long. Give us a review. Doesn't matter what you say, by all accounts. So you could even say you would rather have it presented by the American vice president, who apparently says without him, we'd all be speaking with a German accent. So you either say you would rather it was presented by JD Sports, or whatever his name is, and Windsor Davis. And I think Windsor would put him in his place.
Oh, he's JD Sports from now on.
He is JD Sports, absolutely.
Yeah. I particularly liked his statement last week that he never realised that people listen to classical music for pleasure. JD Sport, that's great. I love that, JD Sport. Do you know what, Kieran? That might crop up on Have I Got News for You, and I'll make sure you're credited.
That could actually make my year.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.